It's the fall of 1944. You know every number on your P-51 Mustang's instrument panel by heart. Maximum engine RPM. The G-load your wings can survive. Your top speed. These numbers are your life. You fight by them. You survive by them. Then it happens. Something tears past your right wing, so fast your eyes can't track it. No propeller, no vibration, just a dark, shrieking slash across the sky, and the emptiness it leaves behind. Your throttle is already floored. You're giving everything your aircraft has. It doesn't matter. The thing is already gone. And in that single moment, you understand something that no briefing, no intelligence report, no commanding officer ever prepared you for. The rules just changed. And you're still playing the old game. This video is about those machines. But more than that, it's about what those machines did inside the minds of the men who faced them. When the war began in 1939, the logic of aerial combat was fixed. A propeller spins, an engine pulls, a pilot maneuvers. Speed advantages existed, but they were measurable, understandable, counterable. You could build a tactic around them. Inside German engineering labs, something else was growing: the turbojet engine. No propeller, no reduction gears, just air compressed, fuel ignited, and raw thrust punching out the back. The concept had existed in theory since the 1930s, but nobody had wrapped it inside a real, combat-ready airframe until 1944. Allied intelligence knew something was coming. Reconnaissance photos showed strange aircraft shapes at German airfields. Pilots reported silhouettes that didn't match anything in their recognition manuals. But knowing something is coming and actually seeing it in the air above you, those are two completely different psychological events. When the jets finally appeared, Allied pilot reports shifted into a different language. Not technical language, shock language. Words that trained, experienced combat veterans almost never used. Let's go through the machines. Not as engineering achievements, as psychological weapons. The world's first operational turbojet fighter. Two Junkers Umo 004 engines. Top speed, 541 miles per hour. Roughly 120 miles per hour faster than the best Allied piston fighter of the era, the P-51D Mustang. Armament, four 30mm Mk108 cannons. A single burst was enough to destroy a heavy bomber. But the numbers are only the surface of the story. In August 1944, the first Allied pilots began filing reports about Me-262 sightings. The initial reaction, across multiple squadrons, was not fear. It was disbelief. Pilots struggled to describe what they had seen. No propeller. In the context of 1944 aviation, this phrase was nearly meaningless. A flying machine with no propeller? That was science fiction. That was impossible. Except it wasn't. The P-51 pilot's greatest tactical asset was the ability to dive and disengage, to use speed in a controlled descent to escape a more maneuverable enemy. Against the Me-262, this option simply did not exist. There was no speed advantage to exploit, no emergency exit from the engagement. Every tactic they had trained for, every instinct built over hundreds of combat hours, rendered obsolete in a single encounter. Allied pilot reports from late 1944 and early 1945 contain a word that appears with striking frequency across dozens of separate documents: helpless. Not angry, not surprised, helpless. The 541 miles per hour figure did not just defeat them physically, it deleted their combat identity. Everything a pilot knew, angle of attack, closure rate, breakaway timing, had to be relearned from scratch, in combat, without time to think. In November 1944, a formation of B-17 Flying Fortresses approached Germany with P-51 escorts. A squadron of Me-262s engaged. The escort pilots attempted to intercept and could not close the distance. The bombers were left completely exposed. In the after-action report, one escort pilot wrote a sentence that has survived in the historical record. "We were there, but we weren't there." 5 words. the complete psychological collapse of a trained combat pilot, reduced to the language of a man watching something he cannot explain. The world's first operational jet-powered bomber and reconnaissance aircraft, two BMW-003 engines. Top speed, 461 miles per hour. This speed made it, particularly during reconnaissance missions, effectively uncatchable. Allied fighters could see it. They could not reach it. The AR-234's most devastating psychological effect was not tactical. It was strategic. Allied planning depended on controlling information. Reconnaissance flights mapped German positions. Intelligence estimated troop movements. Air defense networks were arranged to intercept threats. The entire Allied operational machine was built on the assumption that the sky could be controlled. The AR-234 invalidated that assumption. During reconnaissance flights over Britain and Allied-held Europe, every available anti-aircraft battery would open fire. Every nearby fighter would scramble. The AR-234 flew through the smoke of their rockets and continued on its way. Photographs taken, mission complete. Nothing touched it. This created a specific and particularly corrosive psychological problem: asymmetric visibility. The enemy could see you. You could not stop the enemy. You could watch it happen and do nothing. Allied ground commanders knew the AR-234 was photographing their positions. They knew their preparations were being observed and catalogued. They could not prevent it. This knowledge, that you are being watched, studied, and there is nothing you can do, is one of the oldest and most effective forms of psychological pressure. In March 1945, R-234s were tasked with bombing the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen, the bridge that Allied forces had just captured and were using to push into Germany. These missions marked the first time in history that a jet-powered bomber conducted actual combat operations against a ground target. Allied anti-aircraft defenses engaged. Allied fighters scrambled. The R-234s completed their runs. The bridge was eventually destroyed by German sappers working underwater, not by the jets. But the jets had proven something that changed the strategic calculation permanently. Speed, used as a weapon, could make an aircraft functionally untouchable. Design ordered, September 1944. Production begun, January 1945. Operational, April 1945. This timeline represents one of the most compressed engineering-to-combat sequences in the history of military aviation. One BMW 003 engine mounted above the fuselage. Top speed, 522 miles per hour. Construction, primarily wood. Metal was running out. Average pilot age in operational units, 17 to 18 years old. Recruited directly from the Hitler Youth, given abbreviated training, placed in the cockpit. The He-162's psychological terror ran in two directions simultaneously. It frightened the Allies, and it frightened its own pilots. From the Allied perspective, Germany in early 1945 was a country with shattered infrastructure, bombed cities, collapsing fronts, and supply lines that barely functioned. And yet, it was producing a new jet fighter, at speed, in volume. This did not compute. Allied intelligence analysts, military planners, senior commanders, all were working from a model that said Germany was finished. The HE-162 broke that model. If a country this far into collapse could still field new jet technology, what did that mean? How many more, quote, two developments were coming? The unknown is always more frightening than the known threat. The HE-162 was not just a fighter. It was evidence that the enemy's capacity for innovation had not been destroyed. From the German pilot's perspective, the HE-162 had documented technical problems. The wooden airframe components behaved unpredictably at high speeds. There were recorded incidents of wooden sections detaching during flight. The engine, mounted directly above and behind the cockpit, created thermal stress on the airframe that engineers had not fully solved before the aircraft entered service. These pilots knew the aircraft was not finished. They flew it anyway, because the alternative was not flying at all. The HE-162 represents the most extreme version of a recurring theme in the German jet program: the decision to deploy technology before it was ready and accept the consequences in human terms. The only rocket-powered fighter aircraft ever to reach operational service in the history of aerial warfare. Walter HWK 509 rocket engine. Top speed, 596 miles per hour, nearly twice the speed of any Allied piston fighter. Combat endurance, 7 to 8 minutes of powered flight. After that, fuel exhausted, glide back, land. Fuel mixture, T-Stoff, concentrated hydrogen peroxide, combined with C-Stoff, hydrazine hydrate. This combination was explosive, corrosive, and violently reactive to any organic material, including human tissue. A small leak was sufficient to cause severe chemical burns. A larger leak during landing could be fatal within seconds. The Me-163 attacking a B-17 formation looked like this from the inside of the bomber. A burning shape approaches at impossible speed from below. The gunners try to track it. They cannot. The closure rate is too fast for manual targeting. The shape passes through the formation, a streak, a sound, an absence, and is already half a mile away before the gunners can adjust their aim. Seconds later, it comes again, from a different angle. Everything the B-17's defensive gunners had been trained to do depended on tracking a target over time, calculating lead angles, coordinating fire across the formation. The Me-163 gave them no time. It passed through the kill zone before the defensive system could respond. Allied heavy bomber crews began requesting that the Me-163's presence be included in mission briefings, not because they could do anything about it, but because encountering it without warning was causing greater psychological disruption than encountering it with prior knowledge. They had moved past the point of tactical response. They were managing fear. But the psychological damage ran deeper than the Allied side. Me-163 ground crews were required to wear full chemical protection suits when handling the aircraft. Standard procedure. Because T-Stoff would burn through standard clothing and into skin within moments of contact. Fuel spills during landing approaches had caused pilot fatalities, not from enemy action, from their own aircraft's propellant reaching the cockpit. Me-163 pilots were simultaneously the fastest human beings alive and among the most physically endangered by their own equipment. They flew a machine that could outrun any aircraft on Earth and could also dissolve them from the inside out. This is the Me-163's true place in the psychological record of the air war. A weapon that terrified the enemy and consumed its own operators simultaneously. Conventional documentaries evaluate these aircraft as engineering achievements. Thrust-to-weight ratios, wing sweep angles, fuel consumption figures. These numbers are real. They don't tell the complete story. The complete story is in the language Allied personnel used when they encountered these machines. Across dozens of declassified after-action reports, intelligence memoranda, and pilot debriefing records from 1944 and 1945, certain words appear with statistical frequency that stands apart from standard combat reporting. Helpless, futile, cannot engage, no effective response available. These are not the words of untrained soldiers encountering something new. These are words written by experienced combat veterans, men who had survived years of aerial warfare, who had faced flak barrages and fighter sweeps and mechanical failures over enemy territory, men who had developed the psychological resilience that sustained combat demands. And they were writing the language of helplessness. The German jet program, even incomplete, even plagued by fuel shortages and pilot inexperience and technical failures, achieved something that the conventional war effort could no longer achieve by late 1944. It maintained psychological pressure on an enemy that had already established material superiority. One Allied intelligence assessment from February 1945 contained a sentence that has stayed in the historical record. This nation should not be able to do this, and yet it does. That sentence is not a technical evaluation. It is a psychological admission. The admission that the enemy has produced something your model of reality cannot fully absorb. That is the most powerful weapon the German jet program ever deployed. Not speed, not firepower, not range. Uncertainty. At the start of this video, we held back one piece of information. The aircraft that scored the highest on the Psychological Impact Index was not designed primarily to destroy bombers. That aircraft is the Me-163 Comet. Its kill record against Allied aircraft was modest. Its operational window was narrow. Its technical problems were severe. By pure combat metrics, it underperformed against what it cost to develop and operate. But measure it differently. Measure the fear it introduced into heavy bomber crews. Measure the physical danger it imposed on its own ground personnel. Measure the psychological burden carried by teenage pilots who knew their aircraft's fuel could kill them faster than any Allied bullet. By that measure, the Me-163 was the most complete psychological weapon of the jet age. It terrorized the enemy. It endangered its operators. It proved that the boundary between revolutionary technology and human catastrophe was thinner than any engineer had calculated. The jet age did not begin with triumph. It began with this: the moment humanity built machines faster than it could safely control them, and sent men inside anyway.